So apparently if you take the code in the Warhammer 40K app, give it a shake and read through the rules, you can find a whole bunch of secrets that Games Workshop haven't officially released yet. Let's take a look at a few interesting rules teasers for some golden boys. Hello and welcome back to Warspets Tactics, where today we're back to talk through some rather intriguing rules that have come out of 40K's new app, where apparently Games Workshop has uploaded a whole bunch of data that they didn't really want people to necessarily know just yet, but often the internet will find a way, and it looks like we've got a whole load of interesting rules teasers for weapon profiles and unit abilities for unreleased Adetus Custodes datasheets. I think that perhaps the way that they've found it is just as interesting as the rules themselves, so I think it's worth talking through all of it. As we talked about on the last video on the channel, the Warhammer 40K app has just recently been launched for 10th edition. It replaces the one for 9th, and at the moment has the vast majority of the index rules for Warhammer 40K all built in. At this point, Games Workshop has released the vast majority of things for Warhammer 40K rules-wise. We've got all the combat patrol rules and the main rules for the factions, but the main thing that we're missing is Forge World rules. The bits from the Imperial Armour Compendium that are surviving into 10th edition, a lot of stuff has been removed, as with that big Horus Heresy coal that we saw earlier in the day. They still have datasheets, but going to Legends is kind of annoying for a lot of players. GW had confirmed that some things would definitely be staying though, namely all of the Forge World Adetus Custodes units, as their army will be a rather small one without it, with only a few kits. Seems that a few resourceful hobbyists have opened up the code to mine it for rules, and it seems that the way that the data is organised, the easiest things that you can find are weapon profiles and certain unit abilities, though points and profiles for the units seem to be a bit less so. These have been going around I think on a couple of different Discord servers. I must admit I'm not 100% exactly where they've come from or who's been doing the hard work putting the rules together, but a massive thank you to the chap who sent these in to me. Apparently a whole load of the profiles were them putting the rules together themselves. A couple of the rest of the bits look like it's screenshots of full tables of different weapon profiles. In any case, whoever's been resembling things, good job in putting together some Custodes rules for the community. As we don't exactly know when Games Workshop are going to release these fully yet, it could well be within the week, it could be a little while to come. Just for an example as to where this information is coming from, here's a whole great big list of 40K app source code. All looks like a pretty nasty garbled mess, but you can pick out entire weapon profiles and things from it, and then I think use the ID to translate it to other rules and units. Just from this text you can see that the weapon's called Telemon, and it's a melee profile with 5 attacks, weapon skill 2+, strength of 12, armor penetration of -2, and a damage of 3, so that's how hard your Telemon heavy dreadnought is going to be hitting. With similar things to this, I thought we'd just take a look through a few of the other Custodes Forge World units and talk about their weapon profiles and their unit abilities. Obviously without points and full profiles and things, we'd not be able to say anything about how strong the units are, but it's still interesting to see some changes. First up we have the Caladius Grav Tank. It looks like for this guy they've tried to separate the profiles out a little bit more, the Twin Arachnus Blaze Cannon being a lot more suited to anti-tank more so than before, and not quite as good against infantry, and the Accelerator Cannon trying to fall a lot more into that niche. Either way they do look very punchy indeed. The Blaze Cannon is big anti-tank shots, 4 attacks at strength 12, AP 3, damage D6 +2 and twin linked, very punchy there. A good chance of getting multiple wounds with that huge damage profile. It does look like the Arachnus Blaze Cannon has lost its secondary firing mode though, unless that's hiding somewhere else in the code and people weren't able to find it, so it looks like that's going to be a lot more dedicated anti-tank now, as opposed to having dual fire. Otherwise the Eliastus Accelerator Cannon seems to be sort of similar to the Predator Auto Cannon in that it's a great big rapid fire weapon now, 4 attacks hitting on 2s at strength 10, AP 1 and damage 3, twin linked and rapid fire 4. Obviously less AP, strength and damage there. I feel like both of them are probably going to have a niche. I might be a little bit more tempted by the Accelerator Cannon though at first glance. Getting literally double the shots at half range seems rather nice, plus twin links should still have you wounding heavy vehicles at least most of the time. Both seem pretty decent though depending on what you're after. Otherwise the underslung gun is the Twin Lastrum Bolt Carbine, a whole bunch of strength 6, AP 1 and damage 1 shots. Used to be 6 shots but now it's just twin linked and 3. And the Caladius special rule is apparently lethal hits versus monsters and vehicles with the Blaze Cannon, or lethal hits against infantry with the Accelerator. As unit abilities go, I don't think that's the most useful in the world though. It's going to be wounding most of the time due to twin linked anyway. So a lot of the time the lethal hits are going to be going into something you might have been wounding on 3s or better re-rolling anyway. Still though, seems like it's going to be fairly powerful long range firepower for the Custodes still. Next up we've got the 2 unique Custodes Contemptor Dreadnoughts, the Contemptor Galatus and the Contemptor Achilles. Really quite fun ornate models I think. The Caladius is the one with the Warblade and shield. The shield apparently gives it a -1 to wound in combat. I guess it's almost certainly going to have the big 4+ invulnerable save as well. The Warblade basically being kinda similar to how it was before. D6 strength 6, AP -1 and damage 1 flamer shots, followed up by a fairly generalist melee profile with 8 attacks at strength 8, AP 2 and damage 3. Overall still seems like a mighty combatant, definitely looks like he'd be pretty adept at taking down medium infantry like Terminators perhaps, though just like last time looks like he might struggle to punch up against the heaviest vehicles. His ability is to fall back, shoot and charge, so you could jump out of melee, flame something and recharge something different. The Contemptor Achilles is the Contemptor Dreadnought with basically the enormous Guardian Spear. The Achilles Dread Spear still looks fairly fearsome in melee, 5 attacks at strength 12, AP 2 and damage d6 +1. Looks extra fearsome that it has the Lance keyword as well, so I guess even if you're charging toughness 12 enemies, you'd still be wounding them on a 3+ on the first round of combat. Looks like the Dread Spear at least has lost a bit of punch at range though, still gets a damage 3 shots but just one of them at 12 inches rather than up to 24. Its unit ability is mortal wounds in the fight phase, looks like it gets them every fight phase, a 4/5 for d3 mortal wounds on a d6 roll and on a 6 for 3. If you've charged the enemy, then you get a +2 to that roll as well. That's a pretty solid chance for 3 wounds, never mind the d3 there. Again, that one looks like it could be absolutely monstrous with that tank shock stratagem, unless Games Workshop ever gets round to FAQing it. Otherwise, we've got the really big Custodes Dreadnought, and that's the Telemon Heavy Dreadnought. Kind of a shame not to see the toughness profile for this guy yet, as he's often been one of the hardest things to take down in all of Warhammer 40K in the past. The previous versions had great invul saves, a 2+ armor save, -1 damage and feel no pain, all stacked on the same miniature. In terms of his combat things though, his Telemon Cestus, as we saw earlier, is 5 attacks at strength 12, AP 2 and damage 3. Similar sort of punchiness to other things like Redemptors there. His Arachnus Storm Cannon is 24 inches and 12 attacks hitting on a 2+, strength 6, AP -1, damage 1 and devastating wounds. Kind of feels not so enormously dissimilar from things like assault cannons, though the extra AP -1 is nice. Otherwise, his other ranged gun option is the Iliastus Accelerator Culverin, 48 inches and 4 attacks at strength 9, AP -1, damage 3. Nice and general purpose, might punch up a little bit better against tougher vehicles that one I guess. And for his top gun he's got that Spiculus launcher, 36-inch range and a flurry of anti-infantry shots, d6 +3 attacks at strength 5, AP 0, damage 1, and that one also has the blast keyword as well. So extra nice at clearing hordes I suppose. No idea whether he's still retaining a feel no pain type save or not. Looks like other venerable things like the Custodes Contemptor and the Land Raider lost it, but it does seem like it's one of the units that has retained that -1 damage from enemy attacks hitting him, so he's still going to be monstrously tough against damage 2 weapons. For some fast movers, we've got the Agamatus Custodians. These guys are basically a very close analogue to the Virtus Praetors. It is kind of funny that Custodes have access to both these and the Virtus Praetors, plus the 2 flavours of Terminators. The few units that they do have do overlap a bit. In combat, they're armed with an Interceptor Lance, the same as the Virtus Praetors are. These guys have a few more interesting options in terms of ranged guns, though. They've either got the Adrathic Devastator, just the 1-shot now at strength 7 and damage 3, the Lastrum Bolt Cannon, 3 attacks at strength 6, AP 1 and damage 1, or the Twin Las Pulsar, 2 attacks at strength 9 and damage 2, that one being twin linked. I'd probably say that the Las Pulsar might be the best all-rounder there, seems to combine quite nice range and damage, plus twin linked is quite nice. Their special rule is to move, shoot, move 6 inches once per game. I guess a once per game speed boost, or you could do a bit of jump, shoot, jumping. I still feel like their main thing is going to be charging though, and they can't do that after using this ability. Next up we've got the Aquilon Terminators, the 412 version of the Alois, and they get to be armed with Solarite Gauntlet Power Fists or Talons, plus a Fong gun. Their weapon choice is either the Lastrum Stormbolters, 24 inches with 2 shots and rapid fire 2, strength 5, AP 1 and damage 1, solid anti-horde there, or swapping that out for a Twin Adrathic Destructor, a single shot at strength 6, AP 2 and damage 3, and twin linked to re-roll the wound roll. I feel like out of the two, the Adrathic Destructor is probably the more exciting one there. Good AP and damage, and re-rolling wounds means that you're quite likely to do at least some damage to the enemy. In combat, looks like they've got a choice between Solarite Gauntlets and the Solarite Power Talon. The Gauntlets are fairly punchy power fists, strength 8 and hitting on 2s. Looks like they've come down a bit from strength 10 on those there though. And the Power Talons are a fairly devastating anti-infantry option, a massive 7 attacks at strength 7, AP 2, but only damage 1. Again, out of those, I feel like the Gauntlets are probably the way to go. I think the 2 damage looks like quite a big deal there, and it's worth passing up the extra attacks for. Their unit ability is basically the same as the Agamatus Terminators. They get to use from Golden Light once per game to do a redeploy if they're not in combat. As per the core rules FAQ, they can come down to Deep Strike anywhere from Golden Light after. Next up, we've got the Venatari Custodians. These guys are a bit different to your standard Custodes you get in the Codex. These are the jump pack Custodians, either armed with lances or a pistol and buckler. The new shooting profiles have the lances get 2 shots out at strength 4, AP 1 and damage 2, and then hit very hard in combat with basically a Guardian Spear profile but with the lance keyword, so again +1 to wound on the charge. The Kinetic Destroyer pistol is 2 shots and that one keeps the strength 5, but both it and the Tarsus Buckler in combat are both damage 1, and I feel like that's really going to make them the worst option out of the 2. If we're going by the Blade Champion here, I'd guess that these guys are probably going to get a 2+ armor save. They're both in the same armor, and he did. The difference seems to be that the guy with the Buckler has +1 wound now, in kind of a similar sort of way to things like Storm Shields. Overall, I think definitely with the Lances they could be a very interesting unit, though of course it's completely going to depend on points costs. I feel like Games Workshop have been charging quite a lot for jump infantry this edition, putting good value on the fly infantry with great mobility and awesome interaction with terrain. These guys have got the option of getting rapid ingress for 0 CP once per game. I feel like that could be very interesting as well. Set these guys up somewhere in the opponent's turn that's hidden from their units, maybe around about 15 inches away or something like that, and then you pretty much guaranteed a very easy charge next turn. Overall, it looks like a very interesting unit, unless they're priced in points absolutely through the roof. Next up, we've got the Sagitarum Custodians, the Troops Custodians with the guns as opposed to the Guardian Spears or the shields and swords. These guys fight with their Adrastus bolt calivers, 36 inches and 3 attacks at strength 5, AP -1, damage 2 and sustained hits. Basically it is just a heavy bolter profile that you can walk around with for no penalty. It appears that on its base profile it's lost its combi weapon profile. They could also get a single damage 3 shot at close range as well, which was rather nice. I feel like the heavy bolter profile just isn't quite as general purpose as it was, with quite a few things going up in toughness. Might be slightly bad news for these guys versus Guardian Spears, but they do get a bit of a lift once per game. Once per game you get to activate their death rays, and all of their attacks gain devastating wounds at range, meaning that with all those shots you've got at least a fair chance of getting at least 1/6 through, and hopefully some mortal wounds bypassing saves on your target. Maybe still doesn't seem bad if you need some Custodes to hold a home objective while the rest of your army moves forward. I don't feel like they bring quite as much raw value as the Guardian Spear Custodes right now though. Maybe they'll cost a bit cheaper as a result. Finally, at least for these leagues, we've got the Pallas Gravatac. This one's the fairly tiny Custodes scout vehicle with the blaze cannon, maybe filling a similar sort of role to things like Space Marine land speeders do for the Astartes. The blaze cannon feels like it keeps a similar sort of role, 8 attacks at strength 5, AP 1 and damage 1, devastating wounds and twin links. I guess that combo is rather nice. Just on its raw stats alone it should chew through some infantry each turn and hits very accurately. Devastating wounds and twin links means that you could potentially reroll all the wounds if you wanted to and fish for the mortals if that made more sense. Means that it should have at least a little bit more bite against harder targets than it perhaps should. Its unit ability is maybe a little bit unreliable. In the shooting phase a +1 to wound enemies below half strength. I guess it does make it a better unit for trying to finish off enemy units if you get a choice, but I feel like those kind of rules are just maybe a little bit situational. You might still just be best off firing the firepower into what it's actually good against, as opposed to what you happen to get the buff against. Unless it's kind of cheap, I suppose it's probably going to keep fairly peripheral. Would be cool if it got Scout or something to give the Custodes a bit more mid-board presence. So anyway, that's the extent of the leaks that I've seen so far. Seems likely that if all of these are out and about, then the other Custodes profiles might be out too. This does seem to be the majority of the more exciting rules in the Codex though. I guess besides this, there's the gunships and the transport, and the variant spear on the troop Custodes. In any case, it'll be interesting to see Games Workshop's new profiles for these when they are fully out. I'll certainly try and review them on the channel when they drop. In any case, let me know your thoughts on the new units and the way that they're coming out from the 40k app, and feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics, while I'll certainly try and keep up with Games Workshop's news releases and any leaks. Finally, if you have been enjoying all the videos on the channel, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page as well, and you can find that linked in the video description below if you'd like to help support. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things happen next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.